All right, everyone, it's time for the Berniebabies to get embarrassed, humiliated, stomped into the mud patch one last time, which is a circular went out, I guess, that the DNC emailed its various delegates that are going to be taking their seats digitally, of course, at the non-convention. Of course, it's been speculated for some time they would move towards essentially a digital-only or mostly digital format, and they're converting the convention into a formality, which on one hand is perfectly fine. Biden has clinched the nomination. He will be the nominee. He's the only one that has to speak, so to speak. But typically a convention is a big thing. It's sort of a star-studded night where the who's who's show up and they all mill around together and it's a big spectacle. The Democrats are goddamn terrified about a revolt among Bernie Sanders delegates. They're afraid that the Democratic convention would look like this. The Bernie fans storm out. The Bernie fans start jeering at people because they're a bunch of fanatics. Bernie fans are outside burning cars in a rage at the fact that Bernie Sanders didn't win and the Democrats have not adopted socialism. They're terrified of this. They don't want a spectacle. They noted that at the Republican convention it'll be all hugs and kisses, basically. Trump will want a real convention. And so the Democrats have decided, instead of having delegates really participate in the process, the only responsibility they'll have is to mail in a paper ballot. And that's all. They'll get their ballot, I think through email, print it out and send it in. That's the only thing the delegates will do. There's not even going to be a proper... Do you think that the DCCC is even going to properly count the delegate votes? Like if there were a revolt by people who technically are supposed to vote for Biden but refuse to, and fudge a ballot or something, if there was some sort of subversive revolt, do you think that we'd even hear about it? By the way, they're not even going to show the thing live. They're going to have one broadcaster broadcasting, and it's basically going to be an edited freak show. It's going to be basically a Biden speech. So the Bernie Sanders fans have been completely castrated. They're not going to have any say at the convention. They're not going to be allowed to negotiate and try to get concessions for the DNC. They're not going to get to try to influence the Biden campaign. They're not going to get to try to force Biden to promise to make Bernie Sanders a bureaucrat or something. They're not going to get fuck anything. They've completely been shut out by the Democrats. I warned them that this would happen. I warned them that Biden would probably win. Of course, Bernie Sanders was more of a long shot than several of the other alternatives. Pete Buttigieg was more likely to become the nominee after Iowa came through and after New Hampshire, where he almost beat Bernie Sanders in his own goddamn region. What I would say is this. I would say that Bernie Sanders was never going to win. The Democratic Party never liked him anyway. They still don't like him. They see him as a rabble-rousing opportunist, and they're not wrong. Bernie Sanders is a great opportunist. He's good at branding himself and pretending to be the hippie grandpa, but that's not really what he is. He's a big city Brooklynite with ivory tower, upper middle class sort of political ideals who has never actually accomplished jack shit in his entire career. He's done nothing. Like Biden, he's been in office since the 70s. Biden has actually sponsored legislation on numerous occasions and not just naming a couple of post offices. Now, of course, most of that legislation sucks, and that's a big shackle around his ankles at the moment in the campaign because he can't even talk about his political past for the first 30 years he was in office. But at least he technically accomplished something. If you see, accomplishing the starting wars and stuff like that, but he participated. He gets a participation trophy for having actually bothered to do something meaningful. Sanders just comes back to Vermont once in a while to rabble-rouse and pretend to still like Ben and Jerry's. That's basically what happens with him. So the Berniebabies, who don't understand anything about strategy, who don't understand the way in which politics work, these newly minted Gen Z voters that are still naive and believe that the political process can be taken from within, as opposed to through a third party or a grassroots or societally activistic method, those people who still believe that Bernie Sanders is going to fan the flames of a bloody revolution against the evil rich people who we will then eat, it's not going to happen. The Democratic Party is run by those rich people. At this point, more than the Republicans are. They're the big money party now. Biden is the big money corporate Wall Street candidate, and he's got all of these Bernie fans ready to vote for him. I mean, it's a goddamn sham. You're a complete sellout to your own ideals if you're saying, well, Biden's better than Trump. No. From an Occupy perspective, Trump is more the progressive in many ways. I don't see him sponsoring tough on crime legislation. They have a big problem with him because, like, back in the 90s or something, he's like, that group that was falsely accused in New York, he took out an ad against them or something like that. Meanwhile, at the same fucking exact time, Biden was setting the stage for hundreds of thousands of additional imprisonments of people of color, by the way. So it's very interesting how that works. But Trump, orange man bad, of course. Therefore Biden good. Old demented hack neoliberal good. It's going to be funny. I'm definitely going to watch what little footage we'll get from the Dem convention. I bet the real story, though, will be outside where there's protests. Hopefully, if the Bernie Sanders fans really want to make their point, organize mass protests in Milwaukee on that day and force the news media to actually cover it. You can bet that they'll try to minimize things. Oh, yeah, a few protesters showed up, but otherwise it's a love fest. Everyone loves Joe Biden. That'll be the story of the day no matter what you do. Milwaukee could burn to the ground and they would talk about how great Biden is. But if the Bernie Sanders fans go and raise a stink, if apparently you're allowed to protest because protesting doesn't cause coronavirus unless you've got a Gadsden flag that you're waving or something, as long as you're throwing bricks or something and burning cars, coronavirus apparently is magically defeated. It's sort of like back during the Black Plague when they would like sniff flowers and shit to try to purify the air. And so they'd hold like wads of flowers to their mouth when they were breathing, shove them inside their plague masks and stuff, which arguably was a primitive filter, I suppose. And they believed that this would keep the demons away that were causing sickness. They believe that the demons of sickness are warded off by angry mobs that are toppling statues. So there's not really going to be a convention, though. And there's going to be a convention in the sense that Biden is going to show up with a few aides and staffers, and there'll be a digital screen that shows the delegate total and stuff like that. It's not really meaningful, though. I mean, he has clinched. The only thing right now that can stop Biden from being the nominee is if he croaks. Or if he has such a massive gaffe he has to drop and say, well, I just can't do this, so I guess my running mate takes over. Kamala Harris 2020, or, whoever it's going to be. Stacey Abrams 2020. It's going to be a goddamn freak show either way. I mean, think about it. The Dem candidate is pushing 80. He's had 2 aneurysms. He's demented. He was a tough-on-crime liberal for his entire legislative career, pretending to be a progressive now, who's got a fractured Democratic Party. The Democrats are so worried about that fracture being apparent to the independent voters that they've literally pretty much canceled their own convention. And the convention is a big thing. It's supposed to be a big event. It's supposed to be the biggest political event other than maybe the debates. And of course, the night of voting in November. It's the big one. It's when you say, oh, look at this swell dude who's going to lead our party. Oh, huzzah, huzzah. And everyone cheers and throws their straw hats in the air and people mill about doing the politics civics thing. And it's supposed to be a huge event. But they're trying to use coronavirus largely as an excuse because they know nobody's going to show up to cheer for Biden. He doesn't have any enthusiasm. Most of these people believe he'll lose. So they don't want a convention, especially with the Bernie fans rioting by the thousands outside. That's about all. Peace out.